Okay, so get this. We're diving into the entire history of human civilizations today.
The whole thing.
Yeah, like the whole shebang.
Wow.
We've got this audio documentary, the entire history of human civilizations, ancient to modern, and it is massive.
It's a lot to cover.
It really is. But no worries. We're here to dig out the most interesting parts for you.
The good stuff.
Exactly. So what gets you pumped about history? I mean, is it those huge empires or like the inventions that changed everything or maybe those weird patterns humans always seem to repeat?
Well, for me, it all starts with evolution,
Oh, yeah, of course.
Think about it, like 3 billion years ago, it was just atoms floating around, then boom, you get these early humans walking around.
And things start to get interesting.
Exactly.
It's wild how much this documentary covers from like atoms to agriculture.
Yeah.
That's a serious glow up.
For sure.
I was floored when they said early farming actually made humans shorter. Can you believe that?
It's true. Those hunter-gatherers were probably way more athletic than us.
Right? They had to be to survive.
Definitely. But that transition to agriculture was massive, even with the downsides. Like,
Yeah.
take the Sumerian city of Uruk in Mesopotamia around 4000 BCE.
Yeah.
They invent the hand mill. Talk about a game changer.
Oh, yeah. Grinding grain for hours. I'd
Wow.
be hitting the gym for sure.
Haha, for real.
But it did allow for food security and helped cities like Uruk grow like crazy.
Exactly. It's these early innovations that really shaped history.
For sure. So speaking of innovations, the documentary takes us on this tour of other early civilizations.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking the Indus Valley, and their surprisingly advanced toilets, like hello hygiene was important.
Clearly.
And then the Egyptians and their obsession with pyramids.
Oh, yeah, those pyramids.
Seriously, what is the deal with those? It's like they were trying to outdo each other in the afterlife real estate market.
Right, like who has the biggest tomb?
I can't even imagine living in a society where building a giant tomb was like the ultimate status symbol. What do you think, listener?
It's pretty wild. But it does say something about their beliefs. The pharaohs saw themselves as divine, and these pyramids were their stairway to eternity.
Ah, okay, so eternal life. But across the world, in China, we see a completely different approach to leadership with Yu the Great.
Right, he's all about meritocracy.
Exactly. He earns his place by solving problems like taming the Yellow River floods.
A true leader.
Much different than just inheriting a fancy title.
For sure.
Now let's hop back to Mesopotamia for a second, talk about King Hammurabi, his famous code etched on this huge stone slab.
Oh, yeah, Hammurabi's Code.
Basically the world's first legal system, over 280 laws. Can you imagine?
Wow, that's a lot of rules.
Talk about a rule follower's paradise.
Uh-huh, right, but there's a catch.
Oh.
Hammurabi's Code shows this super rigid social hierarchy, and the punishments were totally different depending on your social status.
Oh, so not so fair then.
Not really. Like, if you were a slave and you injured a freeman, you were in big trouble.
That's intense.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about how far we've come in terms of justice and equality.
Or have we?
Right? I mean, are there still traces of these ancient hierarchies in our modern systems? It's a question worth thinking about, don't you think, sir?
Definitely food for thought.
Okay, so shifting gears to the Hittite Empire. We meet Labarnus, this leader, who basically brings the Hittites face to face with the Egyptians. And after years of fighting, something amazing happens, the world's first recorded peace treaty.
Really?
Yeah, Ramses II and the Hittite king Hattusili III, they decide to bury the hatchet.
You love to see it.
I know, right? But get this, the treaty wasn't just about peace, it led to this awesome exchange of knowledge.
Oh, wow.
Hittite metalwork for Egyptian agricultural secrets. Both civilizations leveled up.
That's amazing.
Right? It just goes to show that sometimes working together is the best way to make things better for everyone.
Totally. You got to recognize each other's strengths.
So while all this is going down across the Aegean Sea, a whole different kind of civilization is brewing, the Greeks.
The Greeks.
Yeah, independent city-states, each with their own vibes, start popping up.
I can see it now.
And talk about contrasts. You've got Sparta, the ultimate warrior society. Discipline was like their religion.
Intense.
And then you have Athens, the birthplace of democracy.
God, democracy.
But it wasn't your typical vote and you're done system. Imagine using a claritarian, this device that randomly chose citizens for government roles.
Randomly.
Talk about a gamble.
Yeah.
What do you think, listener? Could you handle that?
I don't know about that.
Me either.
It was designed so every citizen had a chance, but it was definitely different.
That's for sure, and not everyone was thrilled about this whole power to the people thing.
Right.
Then comes Plato. He believed governing required wisdom and expertise.
So the philosopher king.
Exactly. Democracy versus the philosopher king. What a debate.
A classic for sure.
So while the Greeks are figuring out government in Persia, Cyrus the Great is building a massive empire.
Cyrus the Great.
This guy was a conquering machine, setting the stage for one of history's biggest showdowns, the Greco-Persian Wars.
Here we go.
Cyrus was great at conquering, but his takeover of the Greek colonies in Ionia really set things off.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
This clash wasn't just about land. It was about totally different ways of life.
A clash of civilizations.
And let's be real, those battles were legendary. The Battle of Marathon, where the Athenians held off the huge Persian army.
Incredible.
And then that insane run by Phidippides to bring news of the victory back to Athens.
That's where we get the word marathon.
Exactly. Talk about it, legacy.
Wow.
So the Persians weren't going to just accept defeat Xerxes. I wanted revenge and led a massive invasion force.
This is going to be good.
Leading to the iconic battles of Thermopylae and Salamis.
Two of the most famous battles ever.
300 Spartans holding off a Persian army, thousands strong. Talk about bravery.
Unbelievable.
And then Salamis, the Athenian navy, pulls off this crazy upset, totally changing the course of the war.
Wow.
These were major moments for Western civilization.
Absolutely.
The Greeks ended up winning, but it came at a cost.
Yeah.
Athens, after this golden age of art and philosophy, eventually falls to infighting.
Oh, no.
The Peloponnesian War, this brutal civil war between Athens and Sparta, left both sides weak.
Making space for someone new to rise up.
And that someone was Alexander the Great, a man born to be a legend.
Alexander the Great.
This guy, tutored by the brilliant Aristotle, was a military genius, but also ruthless.
A powerful combination.
He took over Greece after his father's assassination super fast and then set his sights on the Persian Empire.
Wow, he didn't waste any time.
Nope. His conquests were unbelievable. He took on the Persians in a series of battles, Granicus River Issus, and then the legendary Battle of Gaugamela.
He just kept winning.
He just kept pushing east all the way to India.
What?
I know the scale of his ambition is mind-blowing. He created this empire that stretched across continents.
Incredible.
But even Alexander's empire couldn't last forever. He died young at 32, and his massive territories were split up among his generals.
Whoa, wow.
And as the Greek world was falling apart, a new power was on the rise in the West.
Ooh.
Rome. From its legendary founding by Romulus and Remus to its epic battles with Carthage, the Roman story is full of drama.
Oh, I know this one.
The Punic Wars against Carthage were intense. I mean, Hannibal marched his army with war elephants over the Alps to attack Rome.
Over the Alps? Are you kidding?
Talk about an entrance.
Wow, that's nuts.
Hannibal invading Italy was one of the most daring military campaigns in history. But the Romans, they were relentless and ended up winning, securing their power in the Mediterranean.
Classic Romans.
But as Rome got more powerful, it also had more problems internally.
Things start to fall apart.
Enter Julius Caesar, a name that means power and ambition. His campaigns in Gaul, which he wrote about himself, were brilliant military strategy.
Yeah, Caesar was a smart guy.
And then there's the whole crossing the Rubicon thing, talk about a power move.
Oh, yeah, he wasn't messing around.
It was like saying, I'm in charge now.
Basically.
Caesar going against the Roman Senate led to a civil war and then his assassination on the Ides of March.
A dramatic ending.
But from that chaos came a new leader, Augustus, the first Roman emperor.
The first emperor.
And during his reign, a man was born who would change the world.
Jesus Christ. Now things are getting really interesting.
I know, right?
The story of Jesus, his teachings, his crucifixion, it had this huge impact on the world.
It really did.
Leading to the birth of Christianity. It's crazy to think this small sect of Judaism becomes this major world religion.
I know it makes you think about the power of belief and how one person can spark a movement that lasts for centuries. It's really incredible.
It is.
But it wasn't all easy for those early Christians. They faced some serious persecution.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The Great Fire of Rome, Nero's persecution, the Jewish revolts, all these events really tested the early Christian community.
Talk about resilience.
For real.
And speaking of tests, the Roman Empire had its own challenges.
Oh, definitely.
Trajan and Hadrian tried to keep it all together, but it was like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle.
Uh-huh. I can picture it.
You know, then you have Attila the Hun showing up known as the Scourge of God. That's a pretty bad reputation.
Not someone you want to mess with.
Right? Attila's arrival definitely shook things up in the Western Roman Empire. It was a major turning point and not a good one for Rome.
Not a good one.
But in the East, the Byzantine Empire with its capital in Constantinople was doing pretty well.
Oh, yeah, they were thriving.
Justinian, he codified Roman law and built the Hagia Sophia, which is still standing today. Talk about an overachiever.
Seriously impressive.
But let's not forget about the rise of another major force in the 7th century. Islam Muhammad's revelations, the Hijrat to Medina, the rapid expansion of the Islamic Empire.
A fascinating story.
It really is. And the Battle of Tours in 732, where the Muslim advance into Europe was stopped. That's a pivotal moment.
Definitely it shaped the religious and cultural landscape of Europe.
It makes you wonder how things would be different if things had gone the other way. What do you think, listener?
So many what-ifs in history.
I know, right? But back in Western Europe, a new power was on the rise. Charlemagne, the king of the Franks.
Charlemagne.
This guy was a conquering machine. He united a lot of Europe and was crowned Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day, 800.
Wow, talk about a Christmas present.
I know, right? Charlemagne's reign sparked this cultural and intellectual revival, the Carolingian Renaissance.
A time of great learning.
It was then, but like so many empires, his wouldn't last after he died, it was divided up and Europe fractured again.
Here we go again.
And fragmentation often leads to trouble. And this time it came in the form of Vikings.
The Vikings.
Those Scandinavian raiders, they were a force to be reckoned with.
Oh yeah, they were fierce.
But they weren't just about pillaging. They were explorers and traders too, reaching North America way before Columbus.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing how they navigated by the stars and used longships to travel such huge distances. Their impact on Europe was massive.
It really was.
Feudalism with its local lords and vassals, that system came about partly because of the Viking threat.
Makes sense. People needed protection.
Exactly. So they turned to local strongmen for help. But the Vikings weren't the only source of conflict. We also have the Crusades, those religious wars between Christians and Muslims over the Holy Land.
The Crusades.
These conflicts had a lasting impact on the relationship between these two religions. It's a complicated legacy that we're still dealing with today.
A reminder that history can be a source of division.
It can. And while the Crusades were happening in the Middle East over in Central Asia, a new power was emerging, the Mongols, led by the legendary Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan.
This guy was a brilliant military strategist, but also ruthless. He united the Mongol tribes and built an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe.
That's massive.
I know his conquests were brutal, but he also had policies that encouraged trade and religious tolerance.
Interesting. So even the most powerful figures can be complex.
Exactly. They're not always just good or bad.
Right.
Speaking of powerful figures, let's not forget about Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire in West Africa. His pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 was legendary.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this.
He traveled with this huge entourage, showing off his incredible wealth and promoting Islamic scholarship. It really shows how vibrant the Mali Empire was.
It's a reminder that great civilizations existed all over the world.
Absolutely. But back in Europe, a tragedy was about to unfold, the Black Death.
The plague.
This devastating pandemic swept across the continent in the 14th century, killing millions.
Wow, that's awful.
The Black Death had a profound impact on European society. It led to economic and social upheaval, but also to some positive changes.
Really?
Yeah, the scarcity of labor after the plague actually gave peasants more bargaining power, leading to better working conditions. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there can be glimmers of hope.
I like that.
And from the ashes of the Black Death, we see the beginnings of the Renaissance in Europe, a rebirth of art, literature, and science.
The Renaissance.
It was a time of amazing creativity and intellectual energy.
A time of new ideas.
It's like humanity was waking up from a long sleep. And speaking of waking up, the invention of the printing press in the 15th century was a total game changer.
Oh, yeah, it was huge.
It made books more accessible, which helped fuel the Renaissance and led to the Reformation.
The power of information.
Exactly. And while Europe was going through these transformations over in China, the Ming dynasty was overthrown by the Manchus, who established the Qing dynasty.
So many changes happening all over the world.
It's fascinating to see how these different parts of the world were all experiencing their own unique historical events.
It really highlights how interconnected the world was even back then.
It does.
Yeah.
But let's focus back on Europe for a bit. England and France were locked in this seemingly endless conflict, the 100 Years' War.
Ah, yes, the 100 Years' War.
Talk about a rivalry.
It went on forever.
It did. The 100 Years' War was super complicated, with shifting alliances and a bunch of battles that shaped the political landscape of Europe.
It must have been chaotic.
It was. And it also saw the rise of Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc.
This young peasant woman who said she had visions from God and led the French army to victory against the English.
What an inspiring story.
It is, but also tragic. She was a symbol of courage and faith, but ultimately became a victim of politics.
That's so sad.
It is her trial and execution for heresy show how dangerous it was to challenge the status quo back then.
Makes you think.
As the Hundred Years' War was ending, another conflict was brewing, the 30 Years' War, a religious war that engulfed much of Europe.
Another war.
It's crazy how much warfare Europe has seen throughout its history.
It's a lot of conflict.
The 30 Years' War was incredibly destructive, but it also led to the Peace of Westphalia.
A peace treaty.
Yeah, a treaty that helped establish the modern state system.
So out of all that chaos came some order.
It's interesting how that happens while Europe was dealing with its religious conflicts. England was trying out a new form of government, parliamentary democracy.
Oh, democracy.
King Edward I summoned Parliament in 1295, a big moment in English history.
It was the beginning of something new.
It laid the foundation for the democratic systems we see in many parts of the world today. And as we head into the 15th century, a major event shakes things up, the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks.
The fall of Constantinople.
In 1453, it marked the end of the Byzantine Empire.
The end of an era.
It also had ripple effects throughout Europe. For example, scholars and artists fleeing Constantinople contributed to the Renaissance.
Wow, so much impact from one event.
It's amazing how historical events can have these unintended consequences. And speaking of unintended consequences, let's talk about Christopher Columbus.
Oh boy.
His voyages to the Americas in the late 15th century had a huge impact on both Europe and the Americas.
Definitely the Columbian Exchange.
Exactly. The exchange of plants, animals, diseases, and people between the two continents. It was massive. But it also had devastating consequences for the indigenous populations of the Americas.
A complicated legacy, for sure.
It is. As we move into the 16th century, new empires were emerging, like the Mughal Empire in India and the Safavid Empire in Persia. Meanwhile, back in Europe, religious conflicts were still raging.
Those religious tensions were hard to shake.
There were the rise of Protestantism, and the Catholic Counter-Reformation divided Europe even more, setting the stage for more conflict.
It seems like power struggles and clashes of ideas are constant throughout history.
They really are. And the 17th century was no different. The English Civil War, the 30 Years' War, the rise of absolute monarchies in Europe.
A turbulent time.
It was, but it was also a time of incredible intellectual and scientific advancements like Isaac Newton and Galileo Galilei. They challenged old ideas and expanded our understanding of the universe.
It's like humanity was pushing the limits of knowledge even while fighting with itself.
A fascinating paradox.
It is.
The 18th century brought about the Enlightenment.
Ah, the Enlightenment.
This philosophical movement that emphasized reason, individual rights, and the separation of powers.
Powerful ideas.
There were these Enlightenment ideas inspired revolutions in America and France.
The American and French revolutions.
Two huge moments in history. They challenged the way things were and inspired movements for democracy and human rights all over the world.
Their impact is still felt today.
It is, but as we head into the 19th century, another revolution was happening. The Industrial Revolution.
The Industrial Revolution.
This one changed how goods were produced. It led to the growth of cities, the rise of factories, new ways of organizing society.
A time of huge change.
It brought about incredible technological advancements, but also created new social and economic problems.
Progress and problems.
Exactly. And its legacy still shapes our world today. As we move into the 20th century, we face the horrors of World War I and World War II.
The world's wars.
These global conflicts reshaped the world order and left millions dead. It's a sobering reminder of how destructive human conflict can be.
A dark chapter in human history.
It was the devastation of these wars led to the creation of new international organizations like the United Nations.
Trying to prevent future wars.
Exactly. But the end of World War II didn't bring lasting peace. It started a new era of tension. The Cold War.
The Cold War.
This rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union dominated global politics for decades.
A constant state of tension.
It was a time of nuclear threats, espionage, and proxy wars. It constantly reminded us how fragile peace is and the threat of nuclear annihilation.
The scary time.
It was the 20th century also saw incredible scientific and technological advancements from antibiotics to the internet.
Wow, so much progress.
It's like humanity was constantly racing between its ability to create and its ability to destroy.
A race that continues today.
It does, as we face new challenges like climate change and artificial intelligence.
The challenges keep coming.
This journey through history has been both exciting and a little overwhelming.
It's a lot to take in.
It is one thing that stands out to me is the theme of empires. They rise, they dominate, and then they fall.
It's a pattern we see over and over.
Like a cycle that repeats throughout history. What do you think about it, listener? Does history suggest that all empires are destined to crumble? Or can we break free from these cycles?
It's a question worth considering. It's a question that people have been thinking about for a long time. Are we going to keep making the same mistakes, or can we learn and change as a species?
It really makes you think. This whole deep dive has got me realizing history isn't just names and dates. It's more like this huge story filled with ambition and innovation and conflict and cooperation.
It's messy.
It's the human story, warts and all.
And what a story.
From those first steps out of Africa to today's globalized world, we've come so far.
We have.
But we've also made some pretty big messes along the way. Wars, famines, environmental damage. Sometimes it makes you wonder if we're really making any progress. What do you think, listener? Are we doomed to keep screwing things up?
That's the challenge, isn't it, to break those bad patterns? History can teach us things, but it doesn't control our future.
True. We're capable of great things and also terrible things.
It's a balance.
Like this tug of war between good and evil. So how do we make sure the good wins? Where do we even start?
I think education is a big part of it. Understanding the past, the mistakes, the successes. It gives us a way to figure out the present and the future.
It's like having this huge library of human experience to learn from.
Ex-
We just need to know how to use it and apply those lessons to our own lives. But there's just so much information. It's overwhelming. What do you think are some of the most important things we can take away from this trip through history?
For me, it's that everything is connected, whether it's trade routes or the spread of ideas or global conflicts. The world has always been more interconnected than we realize.
Yeah, it's like that butterfly effect. A small thing in one place can have huge effects somewhere else.
It shows how important global cooperation and understanding is.
Absolutely. Another important takeaway is how much individuals can shape history. Think about people like Genghis Khan or Martin Luther or Joan of Arc, or even just everyday people who fought for what they believed in even when it was dangerous.
They were brave.
Their stories show us that we all have the power to make a difference, even in small ways.
Exactly. History isn't just about the big names. It's about everyone's actions coming together.
And that's what makes it so interesting, right? It's a story that's still being written, and we're all part of it.
Yeah.
So what kind of story do we want to tell? What do we want to leave behind for the future?
Good question.
I don't have all the answers, but I know learning from the past is the key to making a better future.
I agree with that. And who knows what amazing discoveries are still waiting to be made.
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? Well, that's it for our deep dive into human history. What a journey.
It was a wild one.
Full of crazy twists and turns and mind-blowing moments.
It was great exploring all this with you.
And to you, listener, thanks for coming along on this ride with us. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep asking those big questions. Who knows what you'll find?